Hello everyone, this is Jimmy Cultist, and we're back again with part 6 of our How to Build an Exploration game in Dreams. I sometimes have trouble remembering all the parts we've gone through, but today we're going to talk about a very simple aspect of game building, which is player feedback. Now, what is player feedback? There are two things that can be. If you're a developer, that's when the player tells you you did something wrong. You know, bug testing and such. But we're not talking about that kind of player feedback. We're talking about when you collect something, you get positive feedback. In Mario, this would be like sparks flying out after you collect a coin, and you get a nice little cha-ching sound. In Call of Duty, you get this little chime when you kill people, something like that. That's player feedback in a nutshell. We're just going to be talking about that real quick. We're also going to briefly touch on how to make items more appealing. You'll notice that our key is barely visible in this environment we've created. We might want to highlight it a little bit more, make it easier for the player to find. And I'm going to talk about a few of the ways you can do that. Now, the simplest way, depending on what sort of visuals you're going for, is just to crank up the brightness on the key. I really must change that door sound effect. You know, that looks pretty nice, although it makes the key seem somewhat magical and not so mundane. So that's a bit extreme, to highlight it by just turning up the glow. Another way you can highlight the key is you can take out one of these little lights, set it to diffuse, and you've got a nice little kind of halo effect around the key, which will disappear once you collect it. I don't tend to like this method, but it works just fine. It's okay. It's one of the ways you can do it. I'll talk further about lights in the future and how you can use them to set the mood in scenes, but for now we're just going to move on to some other methodologies. One of my favorites that I like quite a bit is just making little paint flecks. Set the fleck to circle and go to draw flecks, and basically draw flecks, when you press R2 you can change the pressure, how hard you're pressing it will actually change the size of the stroke. As you can see, thin strokes, wide strokes when I turn on the pressure. But basically we're just going to be creating these little fizzy sparks. Just kind of put them around at different angles. It all depends on what kind of visuals you're going for. I'm going to go here to playback speed. And I'm going to explain some of these things that are inside the tweak menu, which you can open with L1 and square just for, reminders. It's kind of hard to see things in this lighting, but basically the playback speed, it affects the motion. This is separate from effects such as hand-drawn and throb and these kind of things, and flow, so it's a little bit different from that. But if you set it to pulse, you'll get these little wavy, wispy things. And these aren't bad for highlighting items in and of themselves, but I would add a little modification. I would make them just these little glowy dots. Maybe up the glow just a little bit. But this is my personal favorite. It really makes items look pretty tantalizing. I don't know how many times I've used it. I don't know if I actually used it as often as I may claim, but it looks very nice to me. One thing you don't want to forget to do is if you're going to add this little highlight effect, make sure it's scoped in with the group. And if you want to scope something in, it's as simple as just you just grab it, and then you press L1 and X while still holding R2, and that'll allow you to scope something into a group. Simple as pie. Anyway, that looks very nice, and I'm going to go ahead and leave it at that. That seems like a really good effect for an item. Now we're going to go into some other things about feedback. We've already talked about sound effects. Which you'll see, you know, if you just hook this up to the key variable, it'll activate that sound effect. But there's another aspect of collecting things, and that's when you want like a little effect. Similar to this one, we're going to be using paint flecks. All we want is just like some little sparks to fly out and dissipate. Having them go up is usually a good idea too. Kind of like sparks, almost. And how you want to make this look is really up to you. I mean, it's a stylistic choice, but I think it's a good idea generally, especially if you're making like a collectathon or a platformer, to have some kind of effect like this. I've got to admit, most point-and-click games don't tend to have this. Usually they'll just have like a little thing that shows you picking up the key or the item. Just for the sake of covering all our ground. And if you want to see how these trails will end up traveling even when you've set it to pulse, just do preview invisibility. And by going to here, which I believe is duplicates, the duplicates button, basically it's a quick and simple way of creating a hail of sparks rather than just, you know, a certain number. And you can change how many copies they are. Or if you're like this, you can change how far they're spaced apart using the spread. I don't think I want too many copies. Scale jitter kind of alters the scale if you want some irregularities in the size and such. Which in this case I think I will have. We're also going to make it a little bit faster. We want it to be more punchy, so that it pops out and roughly lines up with the sound effect that we've added. Now, how are we going to add this effect? How are we going to make it come out when you collect this key? It's very simple. We just go in here, the timeline that we have the destroyer and the variable on, and we take out a handy-dandy little emitter, set the speed to 0, set it to once, set the object emitted lifetime to 1, which means it will disappear within 1 second, I believe, or 1.0. Whatever you want to refer to it as. And then we just use this object to emit. We will have to move the position over just a little bit. Roughly center it. So when the timeline's activated, it'll play once, activate the emitter, and we'll have a nice handy-dandy effect. Now you'll notice that even after we collected it, this thing continued to spark out and fizzle and then just abruptly disappeared. And that's not really what you want. Well, here's how you mitigate that. After you set it to pulse, turn off loop. That means that as soon as this plays, after it's played once, it won't play again. Then you get something more natural. But that's a nice way to create player feedback. I'm going to be talking about one other methodology. And I'm going to talk about a little alteration in logic and perspective. Now with this timeline, we currently destroy this key, we erase it from existence completely after it activates the key variable. However, you don't necessarily have to do it that way. There is an alternative. And it's a little bit safer, just in case you don't want the logic erased from the level. Although that does save on thermo, so you might want to consider that. Basically what you do is you just take a selector, take its B output, and hook it up to the visibility of the object. Now the only problem with this is, even after we collect the key, well, actually we want to take the A output, and connect it to the key's visibility, that is. But you'll notice it's interesting. That's actually rather strange. It should continue to glow. Something is still destroying. Oh, I know what it is. It's this timeline. How silly of me. Let's get rid of it. But you'll notice the sparks are still there. That's because they're not a part of the key. And you'll notice we can still trigger the collection. So we're going to have to do a little bit more than just make it invisible. And we're just going to scope out here. And a real easy way to do this is you can take this out, hook up the A output to the tag, then hook up the A output to the group's invisibility, which you can access by L1 and square when you're outside of the group. If you're inside of the group, you can only access objects within and not the entire group itself. But anyway, and basically what will happen is when this is triggered, and you can really hook up anything you want to trigger the B output. You could use the tag itself, or you could even go into the emitter and go to object just emitted, so that once the object is emitted, it will activate the B output. But anyway, let's go ahead and test this out for size and see if it works like we want it to. Alright, we can't trigger the key anymore, and we're not seeing those sparks, so I'd say a win-win. Now there's another factor, which is how do I control, how do I make it stay invisible even when I enter back into the scene, because won't this reset? Well, then you just use the variable you triggered. Go to current value and put it in the B input. That means that when this variable is triggered, it will activate that input immediately. So even if you re-enter the level, this key will be, for all intents and purposes, gone. Handy, that. We're going to do one little final thing, which makes, because we haven't destroyed all our logic, we can actually afford to do this. But we're going to put in a handy little message that says key obtained. We're going to put it in big letters because it's very bold. And we're going to resize it a little bit. It's usually good to have this text background still active for several reasons, which I'll explain. You don't always have to have it, though. There's another way you can do it. But this is just the simplest methodology, and I'm going to put it on the timeline and lengthen it out like so. Then we're going to go put this keyframe out here. L1 and square, open up the tweak menu. slightly lift it a little bit. Turn down the opacity of both the text and the text background. Then stamp out another keyframe, don't do anything with it. Stop recording, set it to linear, and set the first one to linear. And this is going to be the amount of time that the text is visible on the timeline. So just lengthen it out. And then we're going to go ahead and put this over here. Make sure it overlaps with these edges here. You don't want it to be, you know, suddenly... Because if you, like, put it too close, well, I'll demonstrate later. There you go, you get a little announcement that the key was obtained, letting the player know for sure what it was they collected, and that they have it. You know, all these jingles and such are probably good enough, but we'll show you what would happen if we didn't quite have this lining up with the edge. Basically, you'll see the text box just cut in suddenly, like that. So make sure that these overlap at the edges, make them a little thicker, you know, just to make sure that doesn't occur, because it's not optimal. Anyway, that's pretty much all you need to know. I guess there is one tiny little thing you could add. You could go to search and look for a stinger. If you're lucky, you've got a handy composer like ElDavisimo to make these stingers for you. We're just going to take this stinger. It's not really proper for collecting an item at all, but, you know. But that's the sort of thing you would do if you wanted to make a nice little, you know, you got the key. Little harmonious jingle. But that's all I have for today. Hope you found that helpful. We're going to give a quick little thanks to our monthly coffee supporters. There they go. And that's all. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And don't forget to ring the notification bell so you never miss another video. If you wish to support our earnest insanity, you can check the links in the description to donate or buy merch. Until next time, goodbye.